welcome. Nice to see you again. And to everybody who's on the call, this is a really, really interesting set of sessions that we've planned for you. And I think really it's about all of us applying our minds to how the world of work is changing. You know, we all know very clearly that what the future world of work is going to look like is going to bear no resemblance to the past. And it's time to reset our ambitions and our thinking as to what the future world may look like. And I think that's what Thabo is setting up for us. He's going to bring you every month. He's going to introduce you to speakers and thought leaders and people disrupting the universe as we know it, to really give you a sense of how things are shifting, you know, largely driven by technology and disruption. It's the major shift, but you know, this technology is just opening up new ways in terms of the way people are working, the way people are thinking, and the way they are applying their skills in the workplace. So enjoy the journey with Thabo. You're going to see him once a month. And my understanding is every month he's also going to assemble some videos for you to watch, just to give you a sense. So in between seeing him once a month, he's going to drop some videos of stuff that he thinks might interest you, but to do with the world of work and innovation and disruption that's going on out there. So let me not take up more of your time. Thabo, over to you. And Byron, welcome.
Thank you, Clifford.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Clifford. And I think before we get started on that one, there's a bit of a running one internal joke. And I suspect that you will enjoy this Bronwyn because we actually have two Bronwyns on the call.
Okay.
So long story short, Byron's unofficial middle name is Bronwyn. So I'll tell you what happened. So a couple of years ago, one of our previous clients at Standard Bank basically wanted something from Byron. So Byron's email at the time was byronw@Systemic Logic, the company we used to work for. So this guy always got emails from either Byron or myself. So one day he sent an email to Byron and CC'd me and said, Bronwyn, thanks so much for the assistance and all of that. So I looked at Byron and I said, hey, who's Bronwyn? And the funniest thing is when you read Byron's email address, it reads, when you look at it or glance over it very quickly, it reads Bronwyn. So ever since that day, we never had the heart to correct Shivesh. Like even in person, he'd say, hi, Bronwyn and Thabo. So Byron,
because you never have to correct your clients because they're always right.
Exactly.
You're onto something there, Clifford.
Yeah.
So Byron's unofficial name has always been Bronwyn. Anyway, so to kick us off, just to touch a bit on what Clifford spoke about just now, I'd like to welcome you to the world of work for 2021. And to Clifford's point, a lot of what we want to achieve with these sessions is, first of all, start to get you thinking outside of the box in terms of what your ambitions are and ambitions from a career perspective. And how we get that right is by exposing you to individuals that come from or practice very different careers or out of the ordinary type of careers. So they go against the grain in terms of the work that they do on a day-to-day basis, as well as around what their passions are all about. So what we seek to do with these sessions is expose you to these individuals so that you get into their heads. It's going to be very much an empathy exercise in us having one of these sessions every single month. Empathy because we're trying to get you to walk in these individuals' shoes effectively. And secondly, what I want to mention is that unlike last year where we just had the guest, we'd like to continue the conversation post these Thursday sessions where I'm going to be sharing a number of, through Bronwyn, a number of links that you can check out, number one, and to read further around what we spoke about. And number two, going to be sharing some videos around some cool stuff that are happening with regards to the topic that we handle on that particular month. So for example, this month is all around the world of AI or artificial intelligence. and chatbots, which Byron will take us through in a bit. So we're really excited to have you on this journey and for you to participate on this journey as well. So we're very excited about it. I guess to kick us off, I'd like to introduce our guest for today. And I doubt I'll do his resume any justice, but yeah, I'll try to shorten it as much as I can because he's achieved so much in such a short space of time. So his name is Byron Wolff, and he's currently a customer strategy manager at Kasisto, which he'll give us some more context around. And Byron's such an interesting character because he has a lot of background around OD, or organizational design, change management, technology adoption, as well as innovation management. So you can hear from that mix of things. It's pretty much a mixed bag around what Byron's expertise are. So Byron's held a role of senior digital product manager for business development as well as sales. And this impacted directly on CX, or customer experience. And these solutions include conversational AI chatbots and chat banking, like WhatsApp banking. I know a lot of us are on WhatsApp. A lot of banks have now adopted WhatsApp banking. So Byron has a hand in how that works in interaction with customers. I know he's also been passionate around behavioral economics as well as biometrics, behavior monitoring, PFM, nudges, recommendations, as well as big data. So as you can hear, Byron's got pretty much a huge resume in terms of some of the stuff that he's currently into and currently busy with. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our guest, Byron Wolff. Welcome, Byron, and we are glad to have you today.
Before you kick off with Byron, you used a little bit of jargon in that introduction, and maybe Byron can just flesh it out. So like when you refer to organizational design,
absolutely,
what does one do in organizational design and customer experience, or what is it that you, so just maybe that's what you're planning to do, but I was just hearing those and thinking, shit, what do you actually mean by those points? And maybe you can just flesh them out in your conversation.
100%. It was definitely part of the conversation.
Okay, sorry.
For sure, no, absolutely, Clifford. Thanks. So before we jump into kind of a glossary of terms, I think because it is vitally important that we kind of all speaking, the same language, and when we're referring to one term, it means much the other to somebody else. But I just want to, just stop and acknowledge the work that you guys are doing. To thank you guys very much for obviously having me on the series, and say that this is something that's very near and dear to my heart. I think that education is vitally important. It is the foundation of any economy, and definitely I think that Africa has got a long way to go, and we're making some huge strides here in South Africa as well. So big ups to you guys, and please keep this going. And Thabo, to your point, this needs to be a two-way conversation, right? An ongoing conversation, because we are learning organisms. With every day comes a new challenge, a new opportunity, and so the conversation needs to keep going as well. So with that, I keep my mailbox open, my WhatsApps are open, my telephone is always on, and I have 2 small kids, so I never sleep. So please contact me anytime. So thank you guys again very much for having me. But Thabo and Clifford, to your point, some of the jargon, right? So we have definitely entered into this new way of work, this new world, which, if we have to take a look at it as a snapshot in life, we think that it's new, but new in its context has kind of always been new, right? If we go back 500 odd years when we were farming and hunting, there were new tools, right, to be able to start to digitize and automate there. And there was this general unease, right? What happens to those guys that are doing that job there and then? And you fast forward 500 years and you realize actually that with new improvements, yes, we are disrupting what people are currently doing, but insofar as we are creating, twice as many opportunities as what we are, say, losing current ones. So that's just something really to kind of, quell or calm anybody's nerves about what actually innovation and disruption mean, right? We hear the word disruption and the connotations are quite negative, but for me, it's kind of the bread and butter. Clifford, to your point, yes, AI is artificial intelligence, right? It is a branch of multi-disciplines, right? It's an umbrella almost, and underneath artificial intelligence, you will find words like NLP, which is natural language processing. You'll find ML, right, which is machine learning. And if we just touch on those very quickly, because they are core components of conversational AI, which is obviously where, the space I find myself in at the moment, is artificial intelligence is any kind of mechanical and computerized system that is trying to mimic the human brain, the thought process and logic thereof, right? Underneath that, when we're talking natural language processing, NLP, it's a computer's way of taking natural language inputs, i.e. the spoken word or spoken text or typed text as an example, and really breaking that utterance, that sentence, that word down into its core components. So if I have to say to a chatbot as an example, what is my balance? The computer system itself is able to actually break that sentence up into identifying what is a noun, what is a verb, and turning that into some sort of computational instrument, some instruction for the computer to do something with it. All right, so that's natural language processing, taking again natural language and turning it into a computer instruction. But now that's not really good enough yet, right? Because the computer is now going to do something, but it doesn't actually know, once it's completed the task, what to do with it. Does it carry a file over somewhere? Does it write a new piece of functionality to a database? What is it actually doing? So behind the scenes, we typically have some sort of automation software. Now, when we're talking about RPA, being robotic process automation, we think of the word robot almost before we do automation, right? And that's kind of one of the misunderstandings, the misnomers in the world, is that it's got nothing to do really with the robots that you will see on, movies like iRobot or Terminator, right? As much as we might like to kind of fantasize about how cool those are. But the RPA is really the computer's way of taking an instruction and doing something with that instruction, maybe a multitude of times, right? So if you can imagine somebody's coming into their workplace every single day, they're doing the same mundane thing, and then, we're not really driving satisfaction here, job satisfaction. You can give that over to a computer that can do something 10 times quicker. They don't ever take a sick day. It can run overnight. So you're not paying this robot, 8 hours to be able to do something. You're paying it for it once, and it can run, the entirety of the workday and beyond. One of the other core terms I think you were touching on there is machine learning, right? So artificial intelligence on its own means that you might have a very intelligent computer or system that is able to do something here and now. But to your opening address, the world is constantly changing. So systems actually without some sort of learning mechanism actually become less and less effective or efficient over time. And that's typically where you need, some sort of machine learning to be able to say, I've learned something today. How is the system going to either maintain that ability or improve its ability over time, given new instructions? So these are all, they are buzzwords. Ultimately, how I see, my journey is keeping an eye and ear kind of peeled, right, to what those buzzwords are, because it's an indication of what is going to be valued kind of going forward. So I hope that and Clifford, to your point as well, I hope that kind of paints a picture about what these, core terms really mean.
So with that, Byron, before I get into some of the things I wanted to understand around your journey, as you were speaking, I remembered there's this philosophy that the Japanese have about artificial intelligence and robots, etc. And their philosophy is that it's actually disrespectful to give a human being a job that a robot can do. So that basically means anything that is mundane, repetitive, and predictive would be disrespectful or regarded as disrespectful if you were to give that to a human being as opposed to a robot. So I found your sentiments around that quite interesting. It just rang in my head as you were speaking.
100%.
So to kick us off, Byron, like for me, I really want to, let's start at the beginning. I want to understand from you now, like what did Byron study? So number one, where did Byron study? And number two, what subjects did Byron do? And thirdly, what were the subjects you enjoyed in high school?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a phenomenal question. So I will be the most honest person that I possibly can be, right? And I say that today, I said it yesterday, and I'll say it tomorrow, right? 100%. School for me was an interesting time because I was big into sport. I was playing sport minimum 6 times a week, and for me that was a great focus. The academic side was a means, right? I knew that I needed to understand exactly what was being imparted to me and try and soak up the opportunities that were handed to me, right? Yeah. In that, you kind of go through high school sometimes enjoying certain things and not enjoying other things. And I think the onus is on every individual learner to be able to take out of every single experience what they can, right? So did I enjoy absolutely every single subject? Did I enjoy every topic within every subject? The answer is no. And that is unfortunately, what we have to do with in life. But what there were core understandings that I took out of everything. And that is, there are certain things that you need to learn to know and certain things you need to learn to recall, but everything you need to learn to understand, right? Yeah. So even those subjects that you may not grapple with or may not resonate with you, there's a certain way that it's teaching you how to think and how to reason with these things, right? So getting back to my journey, I studied at University of Cape Town at UCT. I studied a business science in organizational psychology. Yes. So before I even got there, I was, going through high school, wondering what subjects I needed to take to be able to get to the very next step. Yes. For me, the problem was I didn't actually know what the next step really was. To be honest, I knew I needed to do some sort of business science, something to do with business. My father is a businessman, my mother is a teacher. And so I looked at both of those kinds of career paths and I said, I really enjoy certain elements of this one and certain elements of this one. What can I study to be able to give me almost the best of both worlds? And so organizational psychology it's quite a fascinating field. It really is where, psychology and business come together. It's trying to understand why people do what they do, how they think, how they behave, and how you can get the most out of everybody. And so, Thabo, what you were mentioning earlier, that, that adage, that mentality of the Japanese, it really resonates with me because I think oftentimes we talk about, giving people what they want, but also expecting the most out of them. And so it's the social contract, right? You will get the most out of somebody if they are in their happy space and if they're doing what they love. So ultimately I went through to study at UCT, got my honors in organizational psychology and ended up in a very interesting kind of career path. My first job was an interesting one that again probably didn't sit very well with me, but it was an experience that will live with me till the day I die. And that was really trying to help body corporates and homeowners associations maximize their cash flow and ensure that they didn't have too much debt on their book, i.e. they weren't having people that weren't paying their levies and getting kicked out onto the streets, right? So it had a very strong kind of, their objective was very strong, right? For me, where it didn't maybe sit well was experiencing that side of the world, knowing that that is happening every single day. It's quite a sad reality. But nonetheless, I moved up to Johannesburg. So I left that job and started working my way into the management consulting type world. I knew that I wanted to get into business, but again, then I wanted to keep that core tenet, that core idea of teaching, right? And in the working world, there is always a place for teachers, right? And I'm not talking about the teachers that you might understand in school or lecturers at varsity. For me, the word teacher is a label for anybody that is willing to impart their knowledge on someone else, right? And so people can be teachers. I mean, I learn from my 3-year-old every single day, right? In that word, he's my teacher. It's just really up to me to be able to be the ears and to be an open mind, to be able to learn what he's trying to teach me, right? But that's kind of the philosophical kind of side to it. After management consulting, I think I kind of started to realize that the world of work was changing so fast, and it was actually being, to Clifford's point as well, it's being driven largely by technology. So instead of me, understanding the human mind and trying to understand how people's behavior was changing technology, was to look at it from the exact same problem statement and opportunity statement, kind of from the exact opposite direction. And it's amazing how when you look at the same thing from a different perspective, it changes your mind frame completely, such that I started looking at the technology world and how it was impacting the way that people were behaving and thinking and doing their work. And that's how I found myself, working for a kind of a New York-based startup, where we are ultimately out there trying to change the way that people are doing their business, right, their financial matters, and improve financial wellness for the betterment of both the organization, the customer, and entire communities, really.
Yes. So with that, let's talk a bit around what that actually means. So what does your job practically look like on a day-to-day basis? What is it that you do in contributing towards that greater purpose or that greater vision?
100%, and that's a great question. So as a customer, strategist, or customer strategy and success manager, as the title goes, it is my responsibility to really look at how the end users are utilizing and adopting a new technology and trying to preempt what their next needs will be, right? It kind of goes back to, when T. Ford was asked, if people were to ask back in the day before cars were invented, what would they have wanted? They would have said, well, we want a faster horse, as an example. They wouldn't have wanted the car. So you can't explicitly go to your marketplace and say, this is how you guys are using it now. What do you want tomorrow? So you're almost in this frame of trying to anticipate. What we implement, conversational AI and chatbot solutions, is fundamentally very, very complex systems. So we have large technology teams of some of the smartest people I've ever met that are grinding away in the day-to-day, trying to deliver the best project and best product for use here and now. What ultimately happens in this fast, new ways of work, and this new pace that we're dealing with, is that oftentimes we're dealing with what is happening today, what is happening right now, what is important, what is urgent, and we very rarely look up to say, are we preparing ourselves for tomorrow, for next week, for next month, for 2 years down the line? And so as a customer strategist, I kind of bring together, all those core competencies that you were mentioning earlier, try to bring them together and work with customers to try and give them the best product and the best view of the product that will be successful in 6 months, a year, 2 years down the line. And fundamentally, my job is not really made extremely easy, in that I'm working with a New York-based startup. So we're dealing with American minds, American mindsets, American contexts that are delivering products on the African continent. And the way that we as Africans do business, the way that we communicate, the way that we think, is so vastly different from the Americas, right, from the Asias, that it is up to me to really understand, what it means to be African, how we perceive technology, how do we understand finance and financial wellness, and how will our marketplace ultimately adopt their technology, right? What level of customization and personalization do we need?
I mean, you mentioned an interesting point there around context and the fact that you work with a New York-based organization. So what's interesting for me is that one of the things that I speak about a lot is the Thabo Uber example. And what happened there was that I often joke about how people say my name, right? So because I was born in Rustenburg, and then we moved to Vereeniging, where it's predominantly Afrikaans, or the areas predominantly Afrikaans, where I grew up anyway, people there don't call me Thabo, they call me Thabo, right? Then what I found was that the minute I moved or went to a school or an English medium school, they would call me Thabo, right? And then when I started in the work environment, working with Americans, they would either call me Thabo or Taboo. Now, what's interesting for me is a couple of years ago, when I guess I first started using Uber, I was a couple of meters away from my destination, and the Uber driver had his volume on high. And I heard his Uber app say that in 100 meters, Thabo will have arrived at his destination. So that got me thinking. I was like, okay, so how do people actually say my name? I actually Googled how to say the name Thabo. And it's interesting, the stuff that Google came up with phonetically. So Google said that my name sounds like, this is crazy. It says that my name sounds like BPM, as in beats per minute. So there were a couple of options like Tebow or Taboo, and one of them was BPM as well. So for me, what's interesting about that is the fact that it highlights the importance of exactly what you're saying. Technology needs to be applied within the right context, because what we often think is that you can apply a copy and paste sort of approach where, hey, this technology works in the US, let's apply it exactly the same way as they do there. What ends up happening is that the technology won't be as effective because the context was not taken into consideration. And I think some of the points that you're mentioning here are quite important, especially around the technology and human element, because a lot of people that I've dealt with anyway have this fear around technology and that robots will be taking over, the iRobot sort of look, or the Terminator sort of look. And it's really about, it's interesting that people don't understand that it's really about the human touch or the human element that will actually make these technologies effective. So I found that quite interesting, Byron. Now, the thing is...
you know what, we have to go back to what you were saying earlier. Sorry, Thabo, you mentioned the word earlier that is just, it absolutely resonates with me 10,000% and will forever and a day. And that is the word empathy, right? Yes. I mean, empathy is, it's not very well understood. It's not very well spoken about. We talk about it in the context of, you know, mental wealth and mental health only, right? But not in terms of general day-to-day well-being, in the way that we're talking about societal norms. You cannot, and I cannot stress this enough, you cannot have empathy without context. Context drives the way that we try to understand each other, right? And that's why when we're working in multinational organizations, we're working across time zones, empathy is one of the most difficult things to achieve. And yet, when you look at the latest studies around kind of financial institutions and what technology is doing to the world of work, empathy has been proven to be the number one biggest target for organizations, especially as soon as we have hard lockdown, everyone is working from home, people are not, you know, they feel like they don't have their freedom of movement. It's very difficult, as an example, that ultimately the banks that I'm working with, for banks to create a relationship, a deep, meaningful relationship with their customers. They are finding it absolutely difficult. And the longer that this goes on, the longer that we are closing down branches, the further we go down the line without customers coming into a branch, banks are scared that they are losing their customers, not losing their business. Everyone needs a bank account, but they are losing the mind share. Their customers are no longer feeling any brand loyalty. They might have 3 bank accounts. They might have, their ISP might be X, Y, and Z. They may have a Cell C card as well as a Vodacom card. So loyalty has just gone out the window. And 100%. So ultimately, as a customer strategist as well, it's one of my key passions, but definitely one of my key performance indicators as well, is to make sure that the banks, our customers, remain empathetic, to their customers, right? To their end users. It is fundamentally, it is a non-negotiable. And especially when you're thinking about, financial wellness, somebody's finances is an emotive topic. You cannot come between a customer and their money, right? It is an emotional topic. So the last thing you want to do is kind of lose empathy, right? Very, very 100%. Fundamental point.
100%. I mean, as you were talking there, Byron, I was just having a look at the apps that I've got on my phone here, just to illustrate the point to all the individuals on the call now. The fact that most of these apps, if not all of them, wouldn't exist without customer empathy. And customer empathy, or empathy, is all about, like I said at the beginning, putting yourself in that person's shoes in order to understand what sort of challenges they face. And that brings you to call it a business idea around how you can solve for this particular person. I mean, I was looking at WhatsApp, at Uber, at SnapScan, which is an app, by the way, you can use to pay by using your phone. So you simply scan a QR code. That's what it looks like. SnapScan, check it out. You simply scan a QR code. You don't need your card. Scan that QR code and you pay using that. And the point is, these apps were all delivered because there was a sense of empathy, or an element around empathy and understanding, or speaking to individuals in order to further understand the challenges that they face. So that's an important skill to mention. And as you were chatting as well, Byron, one of the things that it reminded me of was the top 10 skills to have in business or in companies now. When you compare it with 10 years ago, creativity didn't even form part of the top 10. Whereas today, in 2021, having creativity as a skill, or creativity, is seen as the third top skill to have in business and to have in companies, organizations out there. So that illustrates to you the point that you shouldn't look at beating the creativity out of yourself if you're creative as an individual. Because a lot of the time, what we find, I mean, and I'm speaking from experience, when I was still in high school, we never thought about our creativity. And to your point, Byron, from an honesty perspective, I never thought being creative, unless I was some sort of an artist or musician, would actually pay the bills or help further me as an individual. Whereas today, we're seeing that creativity is forming part of a huge element around being effective or future-proof as an individual, right? Now, with that, Byron, you mentioned a couple of things, right? One of the things I'd like for you to expand on a bit, or two of the things, is practically speaking. I'm on this call right now. I'm sitting in a classroom. I want to understand how does Byron practically implement artificial intelligence for his clients? So what does that even look like? I hear you explaining what AI is and that it's artificial intelligence, but what does it actually mean? And secondly, these chatbots, what does Byron do with these chatbots for his clients? How do they benefit you or benefit your clients?
100%. Great question as well. And I want to touch on that creativity throughout as well. So if I don't circle back on it, just, keep me honest, because that creativity, it's a fundamental point. And specifically to your definition, right, of what creativity is. So when we're talking about artificial intelligence, right, as I was mentioning earlier, it's about understanding that there is a core product that has been developed, right? IP, intellectual property, that has been developed by very smart people. They put a black box around it so that nobody can touch it, see it, feel it, smell it, right? And only once it goes through its rounds of patents and trademarks is this company in a position to be able to let it out into the wide world. So typically what we see now, that app that you've seen on your phone now, on the day that it was launched, the customer very rarely thinks about the months, the years, the decades of development leading up to that point. The intricacies of developing an app that works on Apple, and then another one that can work on Android. You might think, let's just change a piece of code here or there, and it will work. It doesn't work like that. Computers are extremely, extremely complex, and it requires a lot of very dedicated skills. So ultimately, in the world of artificial intelligence, what my role is and how our company develops these systems is we spend months and months and months working with our customer, trying to understand what are their pain points, how do their customers actually interact with them, right? And again, you can start hearing their core ideas here of that empathy. Again, it's up to us to understand context and to look at the system. Then once we've understood this context, is to go back to our system and kind of go down a list and say, well, this will work in this context. This one will work if we tweak it in this way. This one is completely irrelevant in our market. And this one is downright considered, rude or, nonsensical in the market, right? And only once we've rationalized that can we actually go into development. And typically what we will do is we'll work with a customer to say, customer experience management, or CXM, I think you were touching on it earlier, is about trying to give customers what they want, even though they may not be able to articulate it, what they think will give them benefit without them really even knowing how or being able to articulate again, and meeting them on the channels of their choice, right? So when you're talking about a chatbot and chat banking, you can have a chatbot in Facebook Messenger, you can have it in WhatsApp, you can have it on WeChat, have it on an internet web page, you can have it in internet banking sites. It really is up to us and our customers to look at where their market is and say, what kind of customer are we trying to serve? How are we trying to serve them? And on what channels are we going to meet them? Because if you are an ABSA, as an example, and they want their chatbot in WhatsApp, and the very next day you try to take that model and say, well, let's go and give this to Access Bank Nigeria. And they go, no, WhatsApp is a personal channel for us. We only use it on internet banking. That model won't apply. So you cannot copy and paste, right? Again, getting to that context, that empathy level. And once we've understood, kind of what channels you want to meet your customers on and what you're trying to give them, now starts the hard work of saying, how do we go about doing that? And that says, typically our customers are phoning us about this. They are emailing us about this. They are coming into branches about this. And again, we are just scratching the surface of empathy, saying, what is driving our customers absolutely insane? What is delighting our customers? Because you want to remove their pains and you want to give them more that makes them happy. That is the science of empathy. And typically then I will work with my team to take basically those core understandings and the core business objectives, translate that into technology speak, and give that over to the smart guys that go and do amazing things in the background. And so that's where I find myself very fortunate in my role, that I almost am somewhat of a translator. My role is, it's not business and it's not technology. I sit right in the middle, and I need to be able to speak almost both languages and be empathetic about it, again, even to my internal customers. And that's something that I think we need to touch on, and probably teach a lot more of in school and university, is how to treat and deal with your internal customer. We always say, and I think Clifford was mentioning it earlier, right? The customer is always right. But I think there's been this monumental shift in the last 5 to 10 years where the big organizations, the big CEOs are actually not too worried about their customers. They look after their people. They look after their employees first. And they then say, if I have a happy workforce and I have happy employees, it's my employees that will look after the customers. Management shouldn't be worrying about that. And that's the core tenets of Apple, of Google, of Facebook. They're not too concerned about the end user. They worry about how their company operates, and the rest then takes care of itself. And not to belabor the point, but you were mentioning there the words of kind of creativity. I've never used the word creative when I'm explaining my own core identity, my own core competencies. I've never been able to draw. I don't I don't understand poetry. I love listening to music, but I wouldn't know the first thing about playing an instrument. And so typically when we're going through, school, specifically high school and then into university, we think that that's what creativity is. And very quickly, and I fell in this trap, I deemed myself non-creative. And so I almost stopped pushing myself because I'm not that creative. And I got into the world of work and I started to realize that actually I have a lot to give in the world of creativity. And that comes with experimentation with solving business problems. Your creativity is actually always started with a thought. When someone sits down to write a song, it starts with a thought. When someone wants to paint a painting, it starts with a thought. Similarly, when someone wants to solve a business problem, it needs to start with a thought. So forget how it manifests itself, right? The output is just the output. For me, creativity is having the ability to test something out, right, in whatever sort of confines, and being very observant about what is actually happening and fold that back into your learning and then try it again, right? We are human beings. We make mistakes. But the difference, I think, between failure and a lesson is really what you take out of it, right?
100%. Fully agreed with that one. So I guess, Byron, in I guess bringing it all together, you mentioned at the beginning that from a South Africa/Africa perspective, we've got a long way to go. So what is it do you think that we need to do from a South African perspective with regards to, let's start off with our schooling? What can we do in order to be better equipped for the future? Because I mean, not only is the future tomorrow, but also the future is now. How can we ensure that we are future-proofed from a high school going age? What can schools do? What can teachers do? What can learners do?
Yeah, 100%. And a phenomenal question, really. And it's something that, I can answer now, but I would implore everybody on the call to think about the answer, think about what their answer would be, and wake up tomorrow and ask yourself the question again. And come Saturday morning, I know it's not a school day, wake up and ask yourself the question. And Sunday, no, it's not a school day, ask yourself the question, because I promise you, things will change, right? And you need to be comfortable in the way that you perceive the world. So I think, what you're mentioning there about the different stakeholders that go through an educational cycle. I hazard a guess here that a lot of emphasis has been placed on the teachers and curriculum, right? But in my heart of hearts, and having studied psychology, there is no way to be able to teach someone that does not want to learn, right? So at the core of absolutely everything, and I will implore every learner on the call to listen to this statement very, very carefully, is never abdicate, never give up the ability or the responsibility or accountability to someone else, right? You have to do what you can with what you've been given at that very point in time. So take the onus upon yourself to always be curious, right? Give yourself the ability to ask questions and go out and find the answer, right? Sometimes that answer will be from a peer. Sometimes it will come from the teacher. Sometimes it will come from the good old internet. There is an absolute world out there. And really, it's just up to you and how hungry you are to really want to be able to learn. So I think that when we're talking about Africa, and what it needs to do as a continent and what South Africa needs to do as a country or as a nation, as a people, really, is to foster that hunger to really ask questions. Not say, let me study the syllabus so that I can pass the test. That is not the point of education. You need to study your content so that you can understand. The test is really just the tip of the iceberg. They are trying to test your core understanding. For me, one of my best ways to learn really is to debate with other people. So I would come home and I would ask my mother or father, I learned this today, and this doesn't make sense to me because this. I would sit with my peers at school and say, the teacher said this, but actually I don't think that's right because this is my view. And when you get into that kind of debate, really it starts to cement not the way that you can parrot learn something to regurgitate it in a test just to pass the next test and forget it the next day. That's not the point. But it's to get that deep-seated understanding about what the content is. Yes. And then I guess there's something absolutely fundamental to adult learning psychology, right? The way that the brain works. There is a finite amount of capacity. We're like hard drives in a computer, right?
Yeah.
You have to be able to learn, digest everything that you can out of it. And when moving on to the next topic is having the ability to unlearn something. And this might come as quite a contentious issue. I'm here talking to the brightest young minds of tomorrow, saying, guys, you need to have the ability to unlearn something. It might seem very weird, but the world of work is moving so quickly that the core understanding of what education really is having the ability to learn very quickly.
Yes.
If you learn Pythagoras today, and in 5 years' time you haven't looked back on Pythagoras, is that really a train smash? No, because you know the core concept of it, and you've got the internet, you've got the books, you've got peers to be able to go back and go and fetch the detail, right? But you need that core understanding. So we really need to kind of get the onus onto each individual to say, what have I got? What cards have I been dealt, and how can I best play them?
Okay, cool. Now I get what you're saying. So what I want to do now, thanks so much for those insights, Byron. What I'd like to do now is open up to the audience or to the learners around any questions that they have. But before they ask any questions, I've got a question for the learners on the line. So I'm specifically looking at Mr. Ernest's class as well as Mr. Musa's class. Can you please ask any of your learners or ask your class whether or not they know what a social media influencer is? Does anybody in the class know what that is? Social media influencer. And if that is going too far, ask them, show of hands, or I want to hear somebody say something. Does anybody know who Bonang is? Bonang, anybody? Mr. Eugene's class? So, yes, the lady in the white jersey there. Who is Bonang? What does Bonang do?
Answer. Who's Bonang? Ask the question.
I must.
Ask the question. Thabo.
Bonang is a reality celebrity.
Yeah, okay. That's correct. That's right. Now, why I was asking that question is because Bonang is one of the social media influencers in South Africa. Now, where I was going with this is to show you guys, everybody in class, that what Byron is talking about doesn't just influence or impact people that work in banks or in factories. It absolutely impacts everybody. So to give you an example, influencers or social media influencers make their money from putting up advertised or advertisements on Instagram, right? So people would basically pay for a certain product because you are advertising it as Bonang or as Thabo. So what's happening is that the concept or the topics that Byron is talking about has actually started to influence or impact social media influencers as well. There's an artificial intelligence called Lil Michaela, and she's an AI that is a social media influencer, which, by the way, like Clifford said earlier on, I'm going to be sharing links with you guys and links from Byron as well around the things that you need to learn about. So don't think this thing is in the future or won't happen to you. But if you have aspirations of being a social media influencer, of being a producer, you're good with making songs or beats, there are AIs out there that are now creating music as well. So what does that practically mean for you? And that goes back to what Byron was saying around questions you need to ask yourselves in order to equip yourself for the future. And with that said, does anybody have any questions like I mentioned earlier on? I see there's a roving camera here with the two gents there from Mr. Eugene's class. They look like they want to say something. Gents, what would you like to say? With the German cut there, or what is it, a high top fade? What do they call it these days? I see our learners are shy today. But Byron, with that said, like, are there any closing words or piece of advice that you'd like to give to the learners and their teachers?
Yeah, Thabo, I think it's pretty pertinent for me to reiterate that kind of last statement that I left, right, is everybody out there needs to make the most with what they've been given, right? The world is a very interesting place. The world is your oyster. I know that people will say, you know, go forth and conquer, take your passions and fly, right? And these are all motivational kind of statements that don't really resonate with everybody. It's about understanding that it comes down to the hard slog. It's about commitment. It's about day-to-day slog, and saying, if I'm really passionate about something, right, I will be able to push through everything. And it goes back to that old saying that if you really find your passion in your work, you will never work a day in your life, right? And be patient with yourself, because you won't walk out of school. Not everybody will walk their way out of school and on the very next day say, I want to do this and I will be this, and follow through with that dream. It's, you know, I'm sitting in my 30s now and I'm still loving the journey, right? Success is not for me the end game. I don't want to become successful on the last day that I get to live on this planet. For me, success is about learning absolutely every single day. That's the journey, right? And as one of my favorite sayings go, is that the day that you stop learning is the day that you start dying. So maintain your hunger for curiosity, and do not ever feed that curiosity beast. Keep on going. Just keep feeding.
Wow, that's awesome. Super awesome advice. Thanks so much, Byron, for your time. We appreciate all of your insights. Round of applause for Byron for his time, please. Everybody, I'm looking at you. Yes, in the white jersey there, white mask. I see you. I'm looking at you. Yes, you.
Thank you, Thabo. And again, thank you to everybody for having me on the call today, and for all the hard work that you guys are doing, you know, leading up to this call, behind the scenes, and for all the hard work that you will do following this call. Please keep it up. It's really great work that you're doing.
Thabo, if I can just have a quick word, because I've got to jump into a meeting.
Go ahead.
The thing for me that is unnerving in the times we live in is the rate of innovation and the rate of change. And I'm not sure, and this is a challenge to you guys in the class, go on the internet and search how long it took for 1 million Americans to use the telephone when it was first invented. And I don't have the stats in front of me, but it might have been, you know, something like 25 years. It would have taken for 1 million users to use the telephone. You then jump forward to, you know, like the 2000s, and it took 1 hour for 1 million people to adopt the iPad, for example. And go and have a look at those stats. It's unnerving. You know, you look at something like TikTok, you know, maybe within 1 hour, there were 1 million users on TikTok when TikTok was brought, you know, out to the creative universe. So this rate of change, because of technology, because we're also connected, is incredibly quick. Is that you can't think that, you know, today I'm interested in this and I'm in grade 9, and by the time I'm in matric, I'm going to go to university and I'm going to get involved in what I'm interested in right now. You know, those 5 years or 8 years later, the world could have shifted immeasurably. So this notion that the only constant is change, the speed of change is incredibly quick because of the technology and connected world we live in. And so there's great uncertainty as to how to make your way. So I think it comes back to some of those key issues. I guess, fall in love with learning, always ask questions, find your creativity and your resilience, and make your way. You know, even some of the skills that we look up today at people we respect in society, doctors, lawyers, accountants, many of those skills are going to be displaced by learning bots. You know, most standard contracts will be done, you know, pro forma or for computer. You may not visit doctors because you'll self-diagnose, by taking your blood and things like that. So some of those careers that you would look up to, like I want to be a doctor, or I want to be a lawyer, or I want to be an engineer, in 5 or 10 years' time, those conventional careers, may no longer be valid. So I think, you got to get with it. You got to stay on top of it, and be creative, solve
100%.
problems.
Yeah, 100%. I mean,
100%, man.
Just on that, Clifford, to bring it back home from a South African perspective, do you have a question there, Wendy, or you high-fiving?
Yeah. Good afternoon to all. I'm glad I can see my children from home.
Oh, nice.
I just wanted to comment. I really like what Byron said. Thank you very much, Byron. Kids, like he says, they need to know how to learn by learning how to unlearn. Because now when we grow up in the townships, we are put into this stereotypical type of learning in terms of finding, getting through school to go and work for someone. Instead of these kids thinking creatively themselves, just to think, to say, what can I do to improve this, or how can I solve this problem to create a job for myself? I really like what he said, that they need just to think creatively. They must learn to unlearn what they've been told by their parents, who are old like myself, who always think about teaching, being a nurse, being a doctor, and working in a factory. They need to look into other ways of making money. Like we have just made an example with Bonang Matiba. Bonang is getting paid for just doing nothing, just for being famous. She's an influencer, she's famous. She's getting paid for visiting homes. They pay her. Yeah, she even thought of doing some wines and stuff because she knows that she is a brand. So these kids can also make themselves brands. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Thank you. So what I was saying was bringing it back to the South African context around what Clifford was saying in terms of adoption of the telephone, for example. Years back, when the cell phone, and this is a true story, when the cell phone was introduced in South Africa, the CEO at Telkom at the time said unequivocally, in South Africa, there is no market for cell phones. Only the wealthy and businessmen would have cell phones. So in total, he said, we estimate the amount of cell phones in South Africa to be a maximum of 1 million handsets. That's it. Fast forward to today, you've got in SA, in South Africa, we've got over 85 million active SIM cards. So that tells you a lot around technology, the rate of adoption, and how quickly things change. So it's important for you to make sure that, to Byron's point and Mr. Makubu's point, you continue to learn so that you understand the signals to look out for so that you don't become irrelevant as a person.